Hello there, I'm Vieno, and this is my 5th video tutorial on D3. In this video we're going to take a look at something called scales, which are a really useful tool in D3. And yeah, so let's just dive right into it. In the previous video we set up this bar chart, which looks like this in the browser. And what we're doing essentially is binding this small data set up here, which is stored in the data array variable, and we set the width. We let the width be a function of the data, right? So for each bar, the width is a function of the data, the corresponding data value times 10. So the width of the first bar is 200 pixels, the second one is 400, and the third one is 500. But what if a strange value would enter into our data set? Well, not a strange value, but let's say a larger value. Let's say 600. Now, since our container, our SVG container here, has these dimensions, 500 in width and 500 in height. I guess you can already guess what will happen. So let's save this and refresh. And you can see that we have an additional bar here, but the width of the bar is the same as for the previous one. So let's take a look at this again. Well, actually, let's just say 60 and refresh, and we have the same result. So the reason why this is that since we're multiplying each value by 10, this value right here will be 600, right? Because 60 times 10 is 600. But the width of our container is only 500 pixels. So everything that exceeds this limit will be chopped off. So this one is actually goes to like here, but since our container ends right here, it doesn't fit. And this provides a good example of when to use scales. So scales are basically, well, they're both functions and objects at the same time. And what that means is that we treat them as functions. We make use of their functionality, but at the same time they return additional methods that we can use to alter their behavior. But let's take a look at how scales actually behave. So let's set up a basic scale. And what we want to use this scale for is to take an input range, which is our data right here, and transform that range into a new range which will fit into our container. So the largest value, we want the largest value to have the maximum width, and for each data point to be recalculated so that they all fit nicely together in this in our container. And the way we do this is by, so first of all, let's start with a good practice of not setting our width and height in the container directly in the attribute. Instead, we create a couple of new variables. So let's say the width variable is 500 and the height variable is 500 as well. And then we can just type in the name of the variables here. Right, and let's create our scale variable. Let's call this the width scale. And the way you define scales is like this. You type out D3 and make use of the scale method, and then you have a number of different scales to choose from, and the most common one is the linear scale. And what this means is basically that the values in the calculated range are the result of a linear function applied to the domain values. So this range right here is actually called a domain in D3, and the resulting range is called the range. So what we need to do now is let the scale know where to fetch the data from, what the original range is. And the way we do that is to make use of the domain method. And this simply, well, like I said, this defines our original range. And you need to include this range between brackets and square brackets like this. And the first value we want to type in is the minimal value, and that will be 0 in our case. And the second one will be the largest value in our data set. So right now it's 60, so let's type in 60. And the next method we want to make use of works in the same way, but this time we define what the resulting range should be. So 0 should still be 0, but the maximum value should never exceed 500. So let's set the maximum value here to correspond to the width of our container. So now we can actually make use of our newly created variable right here, and finish this off with a semicolon. Now down here in our anonymous function, which determines the width of each bar, instead of letting the width be a function of the data directly, we can erase all this and make use of our scale. So the way we do that is we return the scale and input the value that the scale will transform. So we simply type in D here. So for each data point here, the data will go into the scale, and the scale will produce a new range which will fit into our container, and this anonymous function here will return the new value, right? So let's save this and take a look at what it looks like in the browser. So as you can see, all the bars fit nicely into our container, and yeah, I guess you understand what the scale does by now. And scales can actually, they don't need to only deal with numbers. Let's say right now all our bars here are black. Let's say we wanted to give them a color. The way we do that is make use of the fill property. So we could just type in red here and save and refresh, and they'd all be red. But we can actually make use of scales when it comes to colors as well. So let's define a new color scale. Let's just call that color, and that will be a linear scale as well. And the domain will be the same. Let's see here. It will go from 0 to 60, but the range in this case will be a range of colors. So let's say we wanted the colors to go from red for the smallest values to blue for the largest values. Let's try this, and instead of letting the fill be red, let's create a new anonymous function and let that function return for each value, pass it on to our color scale, and return a color shade within this range, right? So let's save and refresh. And as you can see, the smallest value has the reddest shade, and this one is completely blue because it's the maximum value. So if we were to change this to, let's say, 5, it's even redder, right? Because it's closer to our minimum value. Yeah, so that was a short introduction to scales, and this is something that we'll use extensively from now on. So yeah, I'll see you in the next video.